We're still about 200 days from the start of the college football season, but it's never too early to look ahead. There are a lot of great matchups and games on the 2024 slate. With conference realignment, schedules are going to look entirely different. For some teams, they have a gauntlet of a schedule. For others, not so much. Yesterday, we took a look at the 10 teams with the hardest schedules for 2024, and today, we'll be looking at the teams with the 10 easiest schedules for 2024. Before we get to today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel, so make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. There was some confusion in yesterday's video, but as I mentioned, and I'll say it again today, according to 24/7 Sports, these are the teams with the 10 easiest schedules. I personally didn't look at every FBS team to see what their schedule looked like, so these aren't my personal 10, these are the 10 that 24/7 Sports gave. We'll kick things off today with Pittsburgh, and there's going to be a trend with a lot of ACC teams in today's video. When looking at the Panthers' schedule, there aren't really too many games that stand out. Their toughest stretch is probably at the end of the season when they host Clemson and gotta go on the road to Louisville. Up until that point though, there are no games that are truly scary. Sure, there are going to be a couple of difficult ones here and there, but nothing too major for the Panthers. We'll stay in the ACC with Syracuse. For the Orange, they avoid Florida State and Clemson next year, so that's why they're on this list. I talked about this in a video a couple weeks ago, but when Kyle McCord transferred to Syracuse, he talked about how their schedule next year is actually beneficial for them to make a potential playoff run. Now, I know a lot of people were kind of joking and clowning him, but when you look at what Syracuse has to go through next season, there is a reality where they could win 9 or 10, maybe even more games than that. I mean, seriously, take a look at the schedule. What's really difficult on here? Maybe Georgia Tech, I don't know, NC State, maybe Miami, and those are all question marks. So for Syracuse, I'm just saying, if you want to get a way too early ticket on Syracuse to make the playoff, I wouldn't hate on you for that. Missouri cracks this list, and they're the only team from the SEC that is in this top 10. It's actually pretty crazy considering yesterday's video of the 10 most difficult schedules was mainly featuring SEC teams. But for Missouri, they have a really easy schedule compared to those teams we talked about yesterday. When looking at how they start their schedule, there's a really good chance that Missouri begins the season 7-0. I mean, look at that. They're going to be the favorite in all of those games. They do then have to go on the road to Alabama, and then they do host Oklahoma, so their two toughest games come in back-to-back weeks. But outside of that, they shouldn't be worried at all the rest of the way. They got South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas to close the year. Missouri shocked a lot of people this past season, and they get a chance to be even better next year with this easy schedule. If they're able to get by Alabama and Oklahoma, there's a strong chance they could finish the regular season undefeated or have only one loss. But I think the Missouri Tigers are going to be a contender to play in the SEC title game just when looking at this schedule. We have our first Big 12 team today, and it's Arizona. I've talked about this before, but I think the Wildcats have a chance to be the best team in the Big 12 next season, and their schedule definitely allows them to do that. Their toughest matchup is going to be against a former Pac-12 opponent in Utah, a game in which they have to go on the road to. A couple of other games that might be difficult include going on the road to Kansas State and BYU. Arizona will probably be favored in majority of these games, but if I were them, I would have that game at the end of the year circled on their calendar because my Arizona State Sun Devils are going to come in very hungry. We'll go back to the ACC with Virginia Tech. Not a lot of people are expecting the ACC to be great next season, so that's why a lot of ACC teams are going to be on today's list. When looking at the more difficult matchups for Virginia Tech, you look at November when they have to take on Clemson, though that game is at home. That is an interesting stretch they got, as they have Georgia Tech on the road at Syracuse and on the road at Duke, so that last portion is probably going to be difficult for the Hokies. But you look at the first half of their schedule, and that's a lot of winnable games. We have our next Big 12 team, another former Pac-12 team in Utah. Like with Arizona, their schedule is nearly identical. It is a little interesting that they're ranked higher on the easier scale, considering they have to go on the road to take on Oklahoma State. they also have to play Arizona, BYU, Iowa State, and UCF. Things are going to be a little difficult for Utah considering their 2 toughest games come within the first month of the season, but if they're able to get out of that stretch alive, the rest of their schedule is very favorable. Back to the ACC with North Carolina. They have a pretty easy start to their schedule, but there is a bit of a rough stretch as they got to take on James Madison and they got to go on the road to Duke. Later in their schedule, they also have to go on the road to Florida State as well. Outside of that, they should have a lot of winnable games, but I'm not quite certain how good North Carolina is going to be next year. But for a team that's losing their starting quarterback in Drake May, I guess this is the kind of schedule you want when you're switching quarterbacks. Up next, we have NC State, and I'm trying to figure out how they have the 3rd easiest schedule. I mean, look at the start of their season. They got to play Tennessee, who's probably going to be a top 10 to 15 team, and then a couple weeks later, they go on the road to take on a potentially top 10 to 15 Clemson team. I guess when looking at their schedule the rest of the way, that probably explains why, because outside of maybe Syracuse, maybe Duke, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, these are going to be a lot of games that NC State is favored in, considering they're one of the better teams in the ACC. So if they're able to make it out of that tough stretch at the beginning of the year against Tennessee and Clemson, well, then NC State, who knows, maybe they could be a potential playoff sleeper next year. At the very least, they should be able to make a run in the ACC conference. Kansas comes in at number 2, and that's probably because they begin the season playing Lindenwood. The reason that Kansas is probably so high on this list is because they avoid the best teams in the Big 12. They don't have to play Utah, they don't have to play Arizona, and they don't have to play Oklahoma State. I mean, that right there is very, very lucky for the Jayhawks. I mean, seriously, take a look at their schedule and try to tell me what the most difficult game's going to be. It's probably near the end of October when they got to go on the road to take on Kansas State. Or, I don't know, a neutral game against Colorado maybe? Or a game against UNLV? I'm not entirely certain, but yeah, this is a very, very easy schedule for Kansas. But with that being said, it's not the easiest according to 24/7 Sports. That honor goes to Cincinnati. Just like with Kansas, Cincinnati is able to avoid the best teams in the Big 12 next year. They don't play Arizona, Utah, or Oklahoma State. Their non-conference schedule isn't awful as well, as they play Towson, Pittsburgh, and Miami of Ohio. They do have to go on the road to Kansas State at the end of the season, and sure, there are a couple of games that can go either way in the Big 12, but yeah, Cincinnati, I'm not quite certain how good of a team you're going to be next year, but if you're at least not going bowling next year, then something is seriously wrong, because this is an absolute gift of a schedule for being in a Power 4 conference. Well, that wraps it up for the 10 easiest schedules in college football next season. Overall, who do you think has the easiest schedule next year? Or is there a team that wasn't mentioned in today's rankings that has a very, very easy schedule that should have been on this list? Whoever it is, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. I'm posting college football videos all off season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.